Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. And half an hour for Switzerland, although the Swiss is a small country, is not much time. That's why I concentrated on some elements, and I gave you the handout because I can't treat everything, or we can't discuss everything, but so you get it on paper, and we can continue also the discussion later by email. You have my email address at the end of the paper. First of all, I would like to say some 4 points concerning the notion of democracy, because this is important to prevent misunderstandings and to understand each other better. We don't know each other so well. For me, first point is Switzerland is not a model or an example of direct democracy. It's just, for me, a source of inspiration and an encouragement for those who want to share the power with the people in a better way than when you reduce democracy on representative democracy. In a direct democracy, people have also something to say between the elections, and the effect for the politics in general, for the relation between citizens and politics, is totally different. The second point, Switzerland is also not even the inventor of direct democracy, because when you look, old Switzerland before the French Revolution was an oligarchy of rich peasants, rich people in towns, but not a democracy. You had elements in the former construction of the cantons which helped afterwards the fruitful growing of direct democracy. But the main change was the French Revolution. And the referendum, you see elements before the French Revolution in the American Revolution, in the New England states, and the initiative idea that people can make and propose changes to the law which will be decided by the people. This idea comes out of the French Revolution of the philosopher Condorcet, who was a philosopher and a pedagogue. And because he wanted to prevent the Jefferson idea that every state or nation makes every 20 years a new constitution, he said, because I know that never a law is perfect, you have to give those who are subject to the law the possibility to ask a change every time they want. So it was a protection against the imperfectness of every decision anybody takes anywhere. The third point, for me, the democracy is a set of a mosaic, a set of minimum 100 different rules, procedures, rights, elements. In German, you can say a Gesamtkunstwerk. And many of these parts today are in a regress. That's why we have a decline of democracy. This the Dean already mentioned, and that's why the interest of direct democracy as an element to correct this decline is today really everywhere you see this. But you have to be careful, because the center element of the erosion of decline of democracy is that the state loses autonomy, and above the state you don't have any democracy. But in order to bring democracy also above the state, the feeling and the quality and the quality of democracy in the state is very important. That's why it's very important to discuss direct democracy also with a view to overcome the main reason of the decline of democracy, as I will try to do it at the end of the paper. And the fourth element, for me, I think it's very important to stress that every democracy is always unfinished. You never see a perfect one. You can try to approach a perfect one, but you will never reach it. But the direct democracy is a little bit less unfinished than only indirect democracy, because it increases the freedom of the people, and it gives the people more chances to organize their country as they think it would be better done. And what is very important, and this is a mistake many people do, direct democracy is never an antithesis to indirect democracy. On the contrary, every direct democracy has also an indirect element. And you can even say that direct democracy makes representative democracy more representative. So it's even in the interest of representative democracy to have a supplement, a direct one. These are some introductory remarks for the notion of democracy. And now, when you come to Switzerland, as I said, before the French Revolution, you should not speak about democracy in Switzerland, although it has been done under the term Republican cantons in the Alps. Democracy was brought by the French to Switzerland. But it's interesting that after many people's movements between 1830 and 1871, Switzerland became the most progressive country in Europe. And it was the country where most of the ideas of the French Revolution were realized, many more than in France itself. That's very interesting. And in the 1848 People's Spring, the Swiss Revolution was the only one who was successful. But, and this is very important, and the Swiss forget this, and nobody really explains it, and it would change also, I think, the relation to Europe when they would be much more aware about this. They could only win because the others also tried. So Mr. Metternich, who promised the conservatives to help them against the liberal radicals, he could not help them anymore because he was occupied by its own revolutionaries. So the Swiss only succeeded to establish the first real democracy 1848 because the others in Czech Republic, Austria, France, Germany also tried, and they failed. But if they would not have tried, Metternich would have military-free options to overcome the revolution in Switzerland because he hated this country, because he knew that all the rebels are there, and this has to be military conquered in order to prevent democracy to happen. And we, the Swiss, only succeeded because the others also tried, which is very interesting. But, and this is very important, 1848, the only direct democratic element which you see is that the constitution has been voted by the majority of the people and the cantons, on the contrary to the Irish constitution, as we heard before. That was out of the French and American revolutionary traditions, that constitutions should be an agreement between the people how to organize the power, and this agreement should be done with the people, not only for the people. And the rest, it was a representative democracy. And when you ask the question, as I was asked in the title, that why direct democracy was conquered in Switzerland, the answer is very clear, because the Swiss had the privilege to be the first who experienced only representative democracy between 1848 and 1869. And they had the feelings that the interests of the ordinary people have been forgotten by this parliament. And because of this experience that their real interests are forgotten, they started people's movements to amend the representative democracy by direct democratic elements, which gave them the power also between the elections to interfere in the legislation and interfere in the constitution making. So the parliament had to listen to them also between the elections and not only during the elections. So direct democracy is a product of the opposition, because the founders of 48, they were liberals, and they had a very interesting attitude, which is quite modern, namely that the issues of the people are so important that you should not leave them to the people. This is very arrogant, you know, but this is an attitude which is very interesting enough. You have this on the right, but you have it also on the left. Leninism you can define by this, you know, I know better what is good for you than yourself. So I never ask you what you want. I know what you want. You should know. You should want. So I do it. And this is exactly this arrogance where people were fed up and they said, we don't accept this. You have to listen to us. And we want to know ourselves what is good for us. And we don't want this to be decided by the parliament. So the shortcomings of representative democracies led to direct democracy. And it's an opposition instrument. And I would even say, although there were a politician in Switzerland would dare to say this, that some parts of the elites did not accept this until today. And this is also one of the only like this you can explain also some of the shortcomings I will mention afterwards, which undermine, so to say, the beauty of direct democracy in Switzerland in a very evident way. You know, I say this now because it's interesting that 30 years later in California, the same problems, the same people led to the same requests and the same ideas, and also to the introduction of direct democracy in California and Oregon, because the parliament in Switzerland between 1848 and 69 was especially interested in the construction of the railroads and all what was important for economic growth, you would say. And the railroad, this was really the push factor of the economic development, but it hurt the interests of the farmers and the artisans very much because the prices went down and the costs of productions went up. So this meant that the profit of this economic growth came only to a small part of the people, and the majority of the people had negative consequences. And this was exactly the reason why they said, we don't accept that, you also have to look to us and our interests and not only the privileged interests. And this exactly 30 years later, the same push of the railways and the same disinterest to the ordinary people's interests led in California, the West Coast, also to the introduction of direct democracy in 1911 in California. Now, I will come later to the numbers in this way, but first I want to say that the quality of the direct democracy depends on the design of direct democracy. Because one of the main interests of those who conquer these rights is that everybody should be able to use these instruments, not only the ones who have already power and money. And in order to do this, that nobody can, that is really inclusive and not a new privileged of the privileged, the signatures requirements have to be very low. In Zurich, for instance, an initiative costs you 0.6% of the electorate. In Switzerland, on the federal level, 2%. Only to show you, in some German Länder, regions, it's 10%. In other countries in Europe, even some have 20%. When it's high, it doesn't get to the real idea to include the people, because then you can only use it successfully when you have a lot of money, when you have power, but then you don't need it because you're already well represented in the parliament. The same point is the time of the collection of the signatures has to be long enough, 6 months, 18 months, but not 14 days on a police station, like in some of the German regions. Because who likes to go to a police station to sign a petition? And also, which is very important, because this has been done in Germany in the 20s, in Italy until today, there are no super majority requirements allowed, because these have non-intended side effects which are going against the direct democracy idea. When you want, we can come back on this on the discussion. And then what is very important, this is one of the big differences, for instance, also to the United States, the interface between indirect and direct democracy, between the parliament and the citizens, has to be very well constructed, so that it's a cooperation element and not an antagonistic element. And that's why in Switzerland, for instance, the parliament can launch a counter project, and then the people have the choice between nothing, the parliament's idea and the people's idea. And you could also say the people could have the possibility to launch not only a referendum to a law, but also immediately say this alternative would be better, and the people can also vote between 3 options. And and these are the points the Swiss are not very good, and we will come back on this. We should have a supervision of the Constitutional Court in order to prevent a majority vote on minority rights, for instance. This is the case in Germany, or in California, they correct it after the vote. In Germany, they correct it before the vote. In Switzerland, there is no correction. And we also have to establish financial fairness rules and transparency requirements we lack totally in Switzerland. What is very important also, direct democracy is a set of different rights. When you want, we can establish them. And interesting enough, on the local and on the regional level, the set is broader than on the federal level. One of the biggest differences is that on the regional and on the local level, the referendum goes directly against financial spendings. And the fact that you can't construct a big building without the consent of the people gives the people a very big stick in the business of politics. And one of the clear results of all the researching is that wherever the people have a lot to say how the state spends its money, the money is spent much more carefully. And also they have every tax in Switzerland is subject to the referendum. Even a TVA number, the digital number of the TVA, how much you pay on consumer tax, this is in the constitution, in the Swiss constitution. So you can't change it without the consent of the people. But also the size of the income tax and the fortune tax in every canton, in every commune, can be voted by the people. So when you now look, since 1848, we had 620 popular votes in these more than 150 years. 617 exactly. But 2/3 of them happened in the last third of these years. That means in the last 40, 50 years, you had a much more intensive use of direct democracy. You see it here in the blue line of those, these are the initiatives that have been launched. And they're grouped in 4 years period, the legislative period. But now you see, we spoke now of 620 popular votes. When you look now to the initiatives since 1980, there has been 295 initiatives have been launched, but only 2/3 of them got the signatures. So although the signatures requirement are extremely low in Switzerland, it's still not possible to make every initiative get the signatures. So this shows that although they are low, they are not too low. They are not. It's not easy because people have to be convinced to have been addressed, and you can't just send a mail out and then you get the signatures. And of these 295 initiatives launched since 80, there have been only 124 came to the ballot box. And out of these 124, only 14 were successful. The green ones here, these are the successful ones. And the rest, the difference, are the yellow ones. These initiatives have been retired before the vote because those who launched the initiative said the indirect effects of our initiative already is big enough, we don't have to have a vote. Because this is something you should never forget, and we should understand also, the power of direct democracy is that you can launch an initiative and in doing so imposing to the nation a discussion they don't want. And the success of an initiative is also to be much carefully looked at. You can't just say it's only 10%, only these green points. Because 50% of the initiative, after having been brought into deposed in the Federal House, and then the government, the administration start to work on it. They have 50%, they have an effect on the legislation, indirect or direct, even though when they don't win at the end. So, and this is perhaps the art of the thing, that people know that they can have an influence when they organize themselves, when they do this debate, and they don't have to wait until the end when they think we got already enough, and then they can take it back and don't have to vote. For instance, one of the important elements of the last 10 years, that the first time here you have more initiatives who have been retired than you have a lot of initiatives who have been retired, draw back, and also you have more initiatives here in the last column. You have more who did not succeed than those who have been successfully launched. So because people in Switzerland, they say there are too many initiatives, but they forget that many of those who have been launched do not succeed. These are the gray ones. And not all of them launched come to the ballot box, because many are also retired because people think there have already been enough success. The Swiss initiative, the Swiss direct democracy changed the political culture and the political system enormously. You can also say it was a clear democratization of democracy, in the sense that we have to, for instance, in the parliament and in the government, no, we don't have fixed majorities. Every issue has to find its own majority. And also all those who have the power to launch initiatives and referendums, the biggest ones, they are included in the government. But this does not mean that they have a majority always together, because they are different. But it's a peaceful way of integration of diversity, when you allow them also to take part in the government, because the most successful referendums are, of course, those who do not have to be done. This is only the initiative. I don't have the map for the referendums, but when you look to the referendums, you have about only 9% of the laws which are decided in Parliament are subject to a referendum. And the consulting process, the communicative process before making a law and during the law is very carefully done, in the way that you don't make the law in the way that you provoke somebody to make a referendum. That's why only 9% are launched, and of these 9%, normally 1/3 are rejected. And rejected in a sense that you have to make it better. You can start again, but you have to do it in a better way. The society benefits of these direct democracy processes. That is something which is underestimated, because of course you can't compare it with when it would not be the case. But the point is that, and when you think now what the EU would need, and you hear what the benefits of direct democracy is, then it comes very close to the conclusion that, which I'm totally convinced, that the EU needs a constitution with direct democracy, because, for instance, the integration of diversity is much better done when people can participate. This is one of the favorite quotes of one of the big writers of Switzerland, Mr. Dürrenmatt. He said, the Swiss, who are very different, the 26 cantons, very different realities, they like to stay together, because every quarter of a year they're invited to speak about their differences. This is the most free way to integrate, when you allow the differences to be heard, to be listened to, and to take them in. Because the second point is the learning process. The people learn enormously when they participate. this you can prove in a non-Swiss way also. When you ask yourself, which is the country who knows most about the European Union, then it's Denmark. Not because they like the European Union especially, but there they have had the most referendums together, a little bit more than even Ireland had, since they joined with the European Union, because they also have the requirement, but every transfer has to go by the referendum. Other elements like this you see under point 11. European affairs is also interesting because you don't have to be in the Union to be concerned from the Union and to be affected by the Union, and also to have treaties with the Union. And all the treaties can be put to the referendum also in Switzerland, optionally, when they are only indirect effects, or directly when they have a constitutional or legislative element. And when you see about 55 referendums happened in Europe on European affairs since 1972, and 10 out of the 55 are in Switzerland. So every treaty which has been done since 1999 on the personal freedom of movement, for instance, was always put to the referendum. Now, in the last 15 years, we discovered in Switzerland also deficits in our system. That's why I say Switzerland is not a model. Switzerland is a specific way of an intense use of direct democracy. But it's not a model because you could do it in a much better way, also in a different way. And the 4 points are quite evident. For instance, Switzerland is until today the only country where you don't have any law on the relation between money and politics. And this is a catastrophe for direct democracy. Because today you must say that money has colonized the Swiss system of direct democracy. And sometimes one side has 10 times more resources than the other side. So it's an unfair competition. An unfair competition can't produce fair results. This is one of the biggest things. I also participated to change this, but we could not manage to change this until now. And it's the same in California, but in California it's not as bad as in Switzerland, because in California you have at least some requirements. For instance, transparency, who gives the money, nothing like that in our country. And this undermines, so to say, the beauty and also the credibility of direct democracy. The second point is, because we have now very right-wing radical people who start in football, we would say they start to play on the man and not only on the ball anymore. We had now experiences of initiatives which can't be implemented because they go against the Human Rights Convention, for instance, because we don't have any constitutional federal court supervision. And this is what has to be done in the future, that it should not be possible to bring to the ballot box an initiative which can't be implemented, because then you undermine the direct democracy idea as well as the human rights idea. When you want to violate human rights, this is perhaps possible, but then you have to tackle first the membership of in the Council of Europe, in the court. And when you don't want to tackle this, then you have to respect the human rights definition of the court in Strasbourg, and you can't undermine this by voting on the minority issues. This was already Tocqueville's message of 1833, that no majority has the right to vote on minority rights. The third point is that, and this is new, and this concerns especially the German part of Switzerland, there today the public space, because of the crisis of the media, is not existing anymore, which we need to have real deliberations before we vote. So the market does not bring you anymore the condition democracy needs. And there we have to think about including also qualitative media in the public service notion. And not only finance public radio and public TV, but also finance quality media in order to guarantee that the public debate you need for wise decision. Because you can't make your point of view alone, you have to do it in a debate or look into the deliberations in order to find out what you want to do. And the fourth element, which is very strange, but until now, the Swiss society thinks schools and families are enough to educate good Democrats, and this is not the case anymore. And you need much more political education, also for after schooling, after university, and the engagements of the state to support civil society engagements in this way is totally underdeveloped. But for a conclusion, as a conclusion, I would like to stress that the European Union needs more democracy and needs direct democracy as much as democracy needs the European Union and the transnational level. Because the idea of democracy is also is also not only a procedural idea, it's also a substantial idea, a fair distribution of the life chances. But this you can't realize today anymore in the state. You have to go transnational as the markets are transnational. But the democracy stops at the borders. And when we can't change this, we will lose democracy. But when we can only change this when people at home, they still trust democracy. And they don't trust democracy when it's only representative. That's why establishing the identification of the people with democracy helps you when you have direct democracy, and this helps you when you want to grow, make the democracy grow on the European and on the transnational level, because on the European Union level you can't improve the system without the support of the people. Because those who have today too much power on the European Union level, they are only ready to share it another way when they feel the pressure of the people. But when the people are at home already disgusted and disappointed by the quality of the democracy, they will never mobilize and engage to build this pressure up in the European level. That's why I think direct democracy could help, but it has to be done in a good way. And that's why the Swiss case is interesting to learn how not to do it in a bad way, how to do it in a good way, and also how to do it in a way that the European Union is served. Because direct democracy would make the European Union stronger, where they need to be strong, and it would also prevent the decline of democracy, because democracy then get the reach back it needs to really serve the people's interest. Thank you very much.